Leading. Yeah. Women in the Middle East are living longer, but not necessarily healthier. Chronic conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, and thyroid disorders are on a rise. Yet, many still lack access to personalized, timely care. So, here's the real question: what does it take to redesign a healthcare system that truly works for women? Hi, I'm Gayu Lewis. I'm a board certified integrative nutrition, health, and menopause coach and your host. This podcast is where we challenge norms, spotlight solutions, and have honest conversations about women wellness. Joining me today is someone who's answering that question with bold action. Sophie Smith is the founder and CEO of Nabta Health, a groundbreaking hybrid healthcare platform transforming how women in the Middle East and Africa access care, especially for chronic and complex conditions. For over 8 years, she's led NAPTA with a mission to close the gender health gap and make evidence-based, culturally relevant care more accessible. This is a conversation every woman, every healthcare leader needs to hear. Let's dive in. Sophie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I need to get a copy of your intro script because you did a better job of explaining what we do at NABTA than I do.
Thank you. We spoke about healthcare not being accessible or not being up to the mark. Do you really think the healthcare system in Middle East is failing women? And how do we even begin to fix that?
I think healthcare systems in general, historically and still today, are failing women. Not necessarily on purpose all of the time, but because women were largely excluded from clinical trials until 1993 and still today represent a minority of clinical trial participants, there exist systemic gender gaps and biases in healthcare. For example, it takes 4 times longer on average to diagnose women with the same chronic conditions as men, even though they're twice as likely to see a doctor in the first place. And to understand the level of systematizing of these gender gaps, you can look at, the way clinical trials are still conducted today. So 70 to 80% of all animal studies involve only male test subjects because male test subjects are deemed to be less hormonally complex and therefore more guaranteed to give clean results. So much so that if you are a PhD student and you have a clinical trial that you want to run, you'll be told by your professor still in most universities, if you wish to finish your PhD in time, you cannot include female test subjects. Wow. Then when they do include female test subjects in animal studies, they tend to use mice who don't menstruate. So mice reabsorb the lining of their uterus. Even where female test subjects are included, the animals that are used are not animals that have the same kind of basic biology and menstrual cycles as female human beings. So there are some systemic issues still that present everything that is designed in care, from drugs to medical devices, even to things like care pathways or the personal protective equipment that is worn in hospitals, from really fitting women. Layer on that the fact that 92% of clinical trials occur in the US and Europe, and the remaining 8% mostly occur in the Far East and places like Japan and Korea, where they have to be demographically representative. And you find that globally, fewer than 1% of clinical trial participants are women of Middle Eastern, African, or South Asian origin. And that also has significant implications from a health perspective. When we opened our research institute at Princess Noor University in Riyadh, we sat with the director of the Lifestyle Medicine Lab, and he told us about a study that had been done on post-operative recovery in Saudi patients. And as part of this study, they found that most of the parameters that we assume to be universal in healthcare, from basal metabolic rate to body mass index to bone density to even kind of normal ranges for hormones, were off for Saudi populations. Okay. If you take that fact, you can probably extrapolate it for other populations that have historically been excluded from clinical trials, meaning again that most of what we have that we consider to be universal is really only applicable to the populations that things have been tested on historically. So white, Caucasian, male populations. So we have big gaps. We have systemic biases. We need to do something about them.
You spoke about this, but do you think religion and tradition are barriers to this, or they actually maybe are bridges?
So again, let's take a step back. What is the number one issue for women when it comes to accessing the right care? You could answer different things depending on the different viewpoint you're coming from. You could make the argument that I've made just now about sort of systemic gender and racial biases. You could say that women in different parts of the world have a lot of stigma attached to different aspects of care, from menstrual health to menopause, which is translates in Arabic as the age of despair. And these stigma prevent women from seeking healthcare until it's too late to ignore symptoms anymore. So because of the stigma attached to, for example, periods or infertility, until women cannot ignore the problems that they are confronted with, they will ignore them. And this results in things being diagnosed and treated very late. So you could look at that lens. You could look at the lack of funding available for women's health technologies in general, for women's health in general, for female-founded companies. There are many, 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 many different problems. But I think if you boil it down, if you had to boil it down to one issue that prevents women from doing what they need to do for their health, it's that women have less time. Because we are responsible for 80% of consumption decision-making and 80% of caregiving globally, we don't have time to do things like seek second medical opinions. We don't have the time to navigate complex healthcare or insurance systems. We don't have the time to follow up for the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time an insurance claim that is rejected. We don't have the time to do our annual health checks because we're so busy taking our children for vaccinations or finding access to care for our elderly relatives who potentially just moved to the UAE and don't have proper health insurance, or for taking care of our husbands, our partners, our friends, everybody other than ourselves, that we don't take care of ourselves. And because we have less time and we find it difficult to make time for ourselves, even when the stigma is not an issue, when the lack of representation is not an issue, when the lack of access is not an issue, we still don't pursue the right healthcare solution. So if we want to solve this issue of women having worse health outcomes, we need to find ways to give women back their time.
Okay, get them a watch.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. I want to understand, the moment that sparked Nabta Health for you. Was there a personal pain point that made you say that enough is enough?
Yeah, there was, but I didn't realize what it was until 6 to 7 years into Nabta's journey. I'll tell you how Nabta was founded. I just set up a company in Sierra Leone, actually, that does waste plastics to roads. And I moved with my husband for his job to Dubai, newly married, newly pregnant, and it is 24 hours one way from here to Freetown via Casablanca. And I thought, there's no way that I can continue to build this company in Sierra Leone with a young baby. So I'm going to do something here. I want to do something here. I went to speak at a conference in Kuwait on diabetes, and I got chatting there to the organizer, not about diabetes, but about the fact that I was pregnant. And a month or so later, he sent me a bunch of statistics on women's health in the region and said, do you want to do something women's health together? And as soon as I sat, I was reading through these stats, 80% of breast cancer is diagnosed at stage 4, 40% of women not attending a single antenatal appointment, lots of stigma, lots of taboo, lots of issues with access, lots of issues with education, late diagnosis, misdiagnosis, etc. I knew this was the company I wanted to build. I said, give me a couple of months, hand over my existing business interests, have this baby. In the end, he became my founding investor, and we started work on the company the day my son was due, 21st of March 2017. But that's not why I started Nabta. For years, if people asked me why I started Nabta, I would tell them this story about how it happened, not the why. And I would say it's because I'm fundamentally wired against injustice, which is true. Maybe because I'm the oldest of 8 children, maybe because I'm neurodivergent, who knows? But I don't like it when things are unfair. And you referred at the beginning to the gender health gap.
Yep.
There is a significant gap. We have issues with gender and racial equity in healthcare. And this is a problem that, for whatever reason, I want to solve. But that's not the reason why I founded Nabta. And I suddenly figured out why it was, probably a year and a bit ago. And I cannot remember what prompted the revelation. But the reason I founded Nabta was my grandmother. So my grandmother passed away in 1998 at the age of 59 with breast cancer. She had been diagnosed 5 years previously. She had been treated. She'd gone through chemo, was in remission. And in early 1998, she went back for her 5-year check, and they gave her the all clear. About a month or so later, she started to feel really unwell. So she went to see her doctor, and the doctor took one look at her and saw an overweight woman in her mid-50s and said, you need to go on a diet, go away, lose some weight, and come back in a few months' time. So she went on a diet. I still remember going strawberry picking with my gran and granddad in a place near where we lived in South London. And I remember Gran saying, I can't have strawberries because I'm on a diet. And anyway, 3 months later, she went back to see the doctor. She'd lost a bunch of weight. She was feeling worse. And finally, the doctor thought maybe we should do some more investigations. But by that point, the cancer, which was back, had spread to her liver. It had metastasized. And they started her on chemo, but she died a month later. And my grandmother was an extraordinary woman, very naughty, constantly pushed boundaries and challenged conventions. But she was also the sort of person who spoke up and stuck up for everybody who didn't have a voice. She adopted an entire family who'd emigrated from Japan and didn't have anywhere to live, and they lived with her, and she took them on holiday and took care of them for years. She used to tutor neurodivergent children in schools and loved them. And saw the potential in them at a time when neurodivergence wasn't something that was understood or really spoken about. She fought for everybody, but even with this big voice of hers, she wasn't able to make herself heard or seen by the doctors that she saw. And she died. And when we engaged over sort of the 6 years that we were in R&D with approximately 25 million women in MENA, this was the thing that came back to us the most. I feel like I'm not seen. I feel like I'm not heard. I feel like I don't have a voice. The doctor tells me it's all in my head. The doctor dismisses me. So I think that's the thing that drives me, is to get to a point where no matter who you are, or where you're born, or what you look like, or what your income status is, and despite the fact that you are a woman, you can still access the same quality care, and you can still have a voice. You can still make yourself heard.
Amazing. So was that the problem that you were trying to solve when you started Nabta, or probably down the line with Nabta?
Again, this was we understood, we had these two basic assumptions: the systemic gender biases, the systemic racial biases. We started with a mission of advancing women's health in the Middle East and Africa. Over time, that's evolved to actually establishing the GCC as a global hub of innovation in women's health and really driving truly affordable, accessible healthcare for women across the region from here. But the desire to support women in being heard, to address the essential inequities, these were things I think that were core to our mission, but that, only over time did I become aware of how important they were to me. So we started with this mission of advancing women's health. We spent probably the best part of 15 to 18 months in the discovery phase of R&D. So just looking at things that were being built in other parts of the world, things that were starting to get investment in other parts of the world, things that were scaling, and trying to figure out what would actually work here. Because unlike somewhere like the US, where in terms of infrastructure, access, and education, things are fairly consistent, across the region, they're pretty disparate. You have huge differences in GDP per capita between, say, Qatar and South Sudan. What unites people in the region? It's the importance of family, a strong sense of cultural identity, language, religion, a love of the land and a close connection to the land, different things to the West. And so we thought, okay, disparities in infrastructure, access, and education, but these very, very strong threads that unite peoples in all of the different countries in different ways across the region. What can we build? And so we came up with this hybrid model of care. So combining digital and traditional healthcare through an augmented intelligence. So an intelligence that combines the best of clinician, patient, and artificial intelligence to take all of the knowledge that was previously held within medical specialties, within hospitals, within even within more traditional Eastern practices, and reorient it up to 80% of it around the individual, and then using this augmented intelligence, personalize it to the age, stage, and goals of those individuals. And in order to make it affordable and accessible in different contexts, rather than have a kind of pay-per-service model, we have a subscription-based model of care, as part of which you get access to bundles of services, which again are tailored to the needs of the individual. So this is the basic model that we built. Again, if it's a subscription-based model, you can flex the pricing up and down depending on the GDP per capita of the country, because the services again will be provided locally.
Yep.
You don't have to charge the same amount to somebody who's visiting a clinic in rural Kenya versus someone who's visiting in urban Dubai.
Yep.
So we conceptualized this model of care. We raised a couple of funding rounds to build a digital front end, to build this intelligence, and to acquire a first clinic, integrate everything together. We came out of research and development and started commercializing in April 2023. And since then, we've been ramping that up. The primary payers of care in the UAE are not individuals, they are companies, the sponsors of visas. So in the UAE, we don't sell this subscription-based model of care direct to consumer. We sell to companies either directly or through insurance providers. But this, like who pays for what, would change depending on the country that we go to. We will fit into whatever the existing payer model is.
Hey, amazing. You are a female founder in health tech.
Yes.
What has been your hardest hell no moment, and what did it teach you?
I don't know if there's been one moment like that, but there are many. You get pulled in lots of different directions by people who want you to jump on the latest trend, by people who want you to do the easy thing. And that looks like different things on different days. So, for example, a lot of the healthcare providers here take kickbacks on every drug that they prescribe, on every procedure that they conduct, on everything that they refer out for. We don't. We're a value-based company. The companies that do this immediately bump up their revenues by 30-40%. So our revenue growth has been slower because we've not used these mechanisms, but it's been honest and it's been aligned to our core values and beliefs and mission as a company. There are lines of there are areas of healthcare here that are very, very, very profitable. Aesthetics, assisted reproductive technologies, other lines, orthopedics, things that involve usually a lot of interventions, that at some point it has been suggested very strongly to us that we should look at pursuing, again, with an eye on revenue generation. And we've, again, not done it because it's not aligned to our values and our mission as a business, which is ultimately to reduce the dependency of women on intervention, on drugs, on things that they can't control themselves, know themselves, be sovereign and within their own bodies, and also things that are ultimately going to cost them a lot of money, either in the short or long term. So it's not been one no, it's been a lot of no's to a lot of things that would have been an easy way out, but wouldn't have been the right thing for us as people or as a business.
Yeah. Amazing. What makes Nabta's approach different? Can you give me a real-life example of how a women's health journey changed because of your model?
I mean, pretty much everything we do is different in big and small ways, which in itself has involved a lot of education. So I'll take our annual health checks as an example. If you do a health check with any healthcare provider in the UAE, it will be a single specialty maybe you will have something like an echocardiogram and you'll see a cardiologist off the back of it, but you'll normally just see an obstetrician and gynecologist who'll do your pap smear or your HPV test, who'll do your breast exam, you'll get your bloods done, and that's it. Everything that we do is multi-specialty by default and designed to provide women with visibility of their health from all angles, from a physical, a mental, emotional, and a nutritional perspective as well. So our annual health check, yes, involves seeing a nurse and doing a medical history and getting your bloods done. Yes, involves seeing a GP or OBGYN and doing your pap smear and breast exam. But you also see a clinical psychologist, and that is your longest appointment. You see a clinical dietitian who's experienced in dietetics, so personalized dietary advice. And you see a women's health physiotherapist who will do an internal pelvic health exam, assuming that you've had children, and advise you on whether you have any issues with your pelvic floor, including things like incontinence or prolapse. So that is in and of itself already very different. It's not just, again, jumping on trends around things like whole genome sequencing or epigenetic, testing different epigenetic markers. It's actually saying, from a basic perspective, we're going to look at your health as a whole person, and we're going to provide you with a viewpoint on where you are today, again, based on your age, your stage, and goals. So what you want for your health is also important. If you are postpartum living with PCOS, for example, the advice that we would give you is very different to whether if you were pregnant living with PCOS, if you were perimenopausal with PCOS. So again, it's all age, stage, and goal specific. So there you have already two examples of how we would differ from your average healthcare provider.
I'm just signing up for the annual health checkup now. You sold me on
Excellent.
that.
Oh, and our team is amazing. Again, what you see with them is they come into Nabta and they join Nabta with this understanding that they take a multidisciplinary approach. This is not something that is done by standard, not just here, but in lots of parts of the world. Doctors are kind of king or queen. Single specialties like to keep their patients. They don't, if they refer to another specialist, it's you see this person in isolation and then you see this person in isolation. It's not these people are your care team and together they will provide you with unified advice about what's best for you.
True.
So our team is amazing in that they also work really well together. We do a lot of corporate health events together. They are phenomenal human beings. And each of them could be running a country independently. So just from that regard as well, I'd highly recommend them to anybody.
Amazing. We both, and we spoke about this earlier as well, we both have seen, women whisper the word menopause or feel ashamed around infertility. What can we do to normalize these conversations?
Around menopause specifically, so I think there are a few different things. I think changing a little bit our mindset about what it means to age is one. In so many cultures, again, most of which have nothing to do with the West, aging is celebrated, is in fact revered. In large parts of India, as I understand it, men, particularly sons, will not hug their mother until they've kissed her feet. The amount of respect that is shown to women who are in kind of leadership positions within families, and they are in leadership positions, is unparalleled. And so there's an attitude towards aging, towards women become, especially as we walk past the part of our lives where society has the greatest expectations of us in terms of reproduction. This is a time where we come into our power, Yes, the hormonal fluctuations that accompany perimenopause and postmenopause are not insignificant. Can be modulated greatly with dietary and lifestyle changes, but still for a lot of women are not insignificant. Will affect, 63% of women in the workforce reported that their menopause symptoms were so severe that they considered leaving. So we can't play down, we shouldn't downplay the effects of navigating perimenopause on women, but I think if we just change the mindset slightly, that this is a time where we come into our power, it's a start of a new, very exciting, very empowering chapter where we can be free, really. And so for some of us, potentially for the first time, to decide who we are and what we do, then I think that will help. And that can also be reflected in the language. Menopause in Arabic doesn't need to translate into the age of despair. It can be the age of becoming. It can be the age of hope. It can be the age of rebirth. You know, language also has an effect on things.
Yeah. So if you had to redefine, what would you redefine it as?
Probably the age of becoming. You know, I meet a lot of women in their late 30s and early 40s, and I think these women are forces of nature. You know, I would not want to stand in the way of these women. Like, if society got out of their way a little bit, and if society stopped trying to tell us that we need to be different in terms of the way that we look, in terms of the way that we act, in terms of the way that we navigate the world, actually, you know, women as they enter perimenopause become unstoppable forces, potentially for good, hopefully for good. So I think the age of becoming is probably how I would redefine it.
Amazing. You know, you spoke about Nabta Health, where you use AI, diagnostics, all come together. How do you see that play in the future in terms of accessibility for health for everyone? I mean, now you're looking at mainly Middle East and Africa. Do you see that growing?
Yes, I mean, for now, our focus is the Middle East and Africa, but I think the principles of hybrid healthcare, of a kind of decentralized, person-centered model, have applicability everywhere. Again, what fundamentally is shifting? You're going from an era, you know, 100, 150, 200-year era, where healthcare systems were the primary holders of data and knowledge about you and your body, to an era where we as people, as women, should and can and should become the primary architects of our own care, where we have the data about our bodies, where we understand them best, and where we are able to make informed decisions about what tools we use to do different things. And again, because of now the prevalence of machine learning, what you can do as an individual is you can take the billions of data points, or tens of thousands of data points, say, that you would need to acquire as a specialist in order to qualify. And that acquisition of data points and knowledge is what made you a specialist in your field. You can take those, up to 80% of them, and you can access them as an individual who has not undergone medical training, and you can understand them and you can act on them. So I think, again, we're transitioning into an era where healthcare facilities will always exist, but you'll move from having big generalist hospitals to having big facilities that are very specialized in particular interventions associated with particular parts of the body. So you might have a cardiology or cardiovascular health center that has 100 experts who specifically look at and intervene and support with heart health. You might have another one for obstetrics and gynecology. So you have these big specialized centers, and then you'll have different models of small primary care center where, as an individual, you can access a broad spectrum of diagnostic and treatment options. So we're going to move, I would predict, in the next 10 to 15 years, and it depends on the incumbents, and it depends on grassroots pressure, and it depends on the rate of adoption. But in theory, you could move to quite a different looking model of care where, again, you know, people are not accessing healthcare when they are sick, but they are building healthcare systems to actually manage their health within their own homes and communities and interfacing with those on a daily basis.
So you spoke about this. It leads to me a question that, you know, healthcare is always looked at symptom management.
Yeah.
Will it ever move into more preventive, where it will guide people to start looking at their health way before something goes wrong?
Yeah, I think it has to. I mean, again, if you look at where we've built our predictive layer, so most of the artificial intelligence within healthcare today is based on on a symptom level. So you would download a symptom tracker, or traditionally you would go to a doctor and they would ask you a bunch of questions to identify what your symptoms mean, map out likely diseases and the specialty or specialties that you will need to access to support you with that symptom management. When we were in R&D, what we learned is that women in general are not very good at identifying symptoms as symptoms for very good reasons. So if you have 2 children under the age of 3, you're never going to question the fact that you are tired all the time because you have 2 children under the age of 3. But that line of thinking can extend to not questioning if you get out of breath walking up the stairs, or if you have to sit to make packed lunches, or you never have enough energy, all of which are likely symptoms of other chronic underlying health conditions. So if you not picking up symptoms, if you're not questioning things that your body is doing, the ache in your back, the pain in your neck, the blurry vision in one eye, the continuous fatigue, the anxiety, you're not going to download an AI-powered symptom tracker. You're not going to see a doctor. So we built our predictive layer at the goal stage. So we take what women want for their health at any one point in time. I want to lose weight. I'm trying to get into shape. I just gave birth and I need support. I think I might be perimenopausal. We take the goal, and then based on the goal, we can predict and ask about likely symptoms, and from there we can continue the disease and health profile mapping. So I think the transition to preventative care is happening. As we have more globally accessible and relevant technologies, diagnostic tools, remote monitoring tools that can be used by people in home settings, wherever they are, or home or remote settings, then again, those will facilitate the transition of care from being mostly reactive to being preventative and proactive.
Yeah. Again, it was just in my back of my head, I was thinking, a lot of people, when they talk about symptoms and stuff, the first thing that they do is they Google. Yeah, and then Dr. Google kind of gives them everything that they probably need to know, not in the right way. And then now enters ChatGPT, where they think that they ask a question to ChatGPT, who's become people's best friend, and it diagnoses already what's wrong with them. And that's not right, correct? That's where an expert is needed. So with NAPTA, does it kind of bridge that gap? Do you become one of those where people they don't have to go to Google, but rather check with the software itself?
Yeah, but again, it's not about checking with the software itself. The software will check with you. That's the difference. So at the moment, you still need to open ChatGPT and ask it a question to get an answer back. But with a platform like ours, you just need to have established a relationship with it, and then it will engage with you.
How are you feeling, kind of a thing?
Yeah, it will follow up with you. It'll remember, like ChatGPT is designed to understand your patterns as an individual, your patterns in terms of your emotional response, your patterns in terms of your day-to-day life, and it will very quickly learn these patterns. It's great at pattern recognition and interact with you and mirror back you perfectly so that it feels like your best friend who knows you better than anybody else.
What is your take on, biohacking gadgets like a Whoop or, Ultrahuman or Aura rings where people can wear to understand how their body's doing, specifically women to, understand their menstrual cycle? What's your take as a person in healthcare?
So I think these things are useful up to a point. But I think, again, creating artificial dependencies for women, coming back to the original problem statement about time, women who have less time, is not necessarily helpful. If you understand your body really well, there's no need for you to be continuously monitoring it. Once you understand what your ideal sleep pattern looks like and how to support it, you don't need to be tracking your sleep every night. Once you understand how your consumption of food spikes your blood glucose and cortisol levels, you don't need to be tracking those every day.
Yeah.
So unlike other healthcare providers, we don't operate a health score. We operate a sovereignty score. And our objective is to get women from a place where they don't understand their bodies. They're not necessarily asking the right questions about them. If something goes wrong, they don't know who to speak to. They don't understand some of the fundamentals like what their menstrual cycle looks like and how to help it become regular, how to understand when they ovulate, etc.
Yeah.
And again, it'll change depending on their goals. If you're trying to conceive, then understanding where you ovulate every cycle is critical. Take them from a place where they feel disempowered to a place where they feel completely empowered. So we have a score that monitors the transition of women from an absence of sovereignty to being sovereign in their own health. And at this point, the goal is, from our perspective, to have as few dependencies as possible, including on companies like ours. Because when women reach this point of sovereignty, we've given them their time back. And with that time, they can focus on becoming the people they were meant to be.
Yeah. So kind of empowering them with the knowledge that they need about their health so that they take the right decisions or informed decisions about their health.
Exactly.
Okay, amazing. What is a belief, about women's health you had to unlearn as a leader?
I think the biggest one, and again, it's a belief I've unlearned only very recently, is that in order to help anybody with anything, you need to choose yourself first. It's not something I think as women that we're taught. It's not something I think women in general, a generation or 2 generations ago, learnt. You learnt that it was noble to sacrifice yourself, your health, your ambitions, everything for the needs of others. You learn to make yourself small, sometimes invisible. And as a result, again, I think, women have lived for generations with significantly worse health outcomes than they needed to. And it's something I learned too growing up. The only expectations that people had of me when I was younger was that I would be a mother. I wanted to be a writer as well, but mostly because I thought that was fundamentally compatible with motherhood. And then it was only when I graduated from university and I went to work for Accenture, and then I left Accenture in 2014 and had my first company, that I suddenly realized the thing I've been doing my whole life is building. Ever since I was tiny, with whatever I had to hand, I used to build these giant paper castles when I was 2 or 3 years old. That I'm a builder. Like, I want to build, and I want to build things that positively impact the world. As I've become a mother, and I had 4 children in 6 years, my children now are 8, 6, almost 4 and 2. That process of learning again what it means to build, to not sacrifice your dreams, your desires for the needs of others, to honor the needs of others, to honor and make space for your caregiving obligations and the other things that you opt into, but not to lose yourself in it, to choose yourself. It's not a medical lesson, but for my health, it's been critical.
Yeah. Of course, prioritize yourself. What do you wish more women knew about their bodies in their 25s, in their 35s, or at 45?
Okay, so I think, again, there's an understanding that you're going to go on a journey with your body, that it is the vehicle for everything that you want to do in this world. And it doesn't matter what it looks like, that everybody is different. Everybody is worthy of love, of attention, of respect. I think often if women universally loved their bodies, how many industries would instantly go out of business?
Yeah.
Also, how much time and money women would get back. I think that's no matter what the age or stage, that's the thing that I would want women to appreciate, is to be fiercely, passionately, protectively in love with their bodies. And then, to understand that they're going to go on a journey with them. Your frontal cortex isn't fully developed until you're 25. Your menstrual cycles during puberty, another period of wild hormonal fluctuation, are not going to stabilize in your teens, possibly not even until your mid-20s. That's okay. Coming back to the basics, sleep, diet or nutrition, lifestyle, these are the things that will help you to effectively navigate the different ages and stages. So I think, entering into a love affair with your body at an early age, and if you're going to have one love affair for the whole of your life, let that be it. Like, sticking with it no matter what happens, I think is a thing that would stand women in good stead.
I love that. Love affair with yourself.
And with your body.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much people scrutinize and agonize over the bodies of women. Why? They're extraordinary things. You think about every single human being on this planet came from the body of a woman. Women's bodies have extraordinary healing abilities. When you breastfeed, if you breastfeed almost exclusively the first 6 months and then till a year, you use 9 to 12% of the bone from your bone to build the bones of your baby. And the reason that women's bones, despite this, don't deteriorate is because there's a maternal hormone that you have during pregnancy that continuously strengthens and reinforces your bones. They've now started putting it in a patch to treat osteoporosis. It's that powerful. So again, and this is why also the fact that we haven't historically and still today researched women's bodies extensively is mind-boggling to me, because life came from the body of a woman. And if we want to sustain, enhance, extend life, surely the answers to those questions also lie in the bodies of women. You asked earlier about longevity. I am curious in a somewhat detached way about all of the biohacking tools and things that are coming onto the market. But I think, again, if you look at the key to longevity, the answer probably lies in women. Women reliably live longer than men. In worse health for a longer portion of their life, sure, but they live longer. And based on a 75-year study that Harvard did, they believe the key to this lies in social connection. So again, actually, if we want to extend human life, it should not be about adding more things, but rather removing things and making the things that we have to interact with as invisible as possible, so that we give people time to do the thing that actually extends life, which is connect with one another.
So sisterhood, again, plays a key role.
Huge role.
Yeah. What's a daily wellness habit you swear by, even when life doesn't, gets in the way?
So a recent one this year, I used to wake up whenever the children woke me up. And then I would be with them until I dropped them at school. I'd work until I picked them up 3:30, 4:30, be with them until I go to bed. And then I would go to the mall and I would work until midnight, often until the lights went off. And I sacrificed my sleep. This year, I shifted my wake window forward by 2 hours. So I now wake up between 5 and 5:30. And before the children are awake, so I own my wake up. I go for a run. I get some small circuits in. I have my breakfast, and I have had like an hour and a half to myself before they're awake. And then after they go to bed, I work now just 90 minutes, maybe maximum 2 hours. If I have to have a meeting, if I have to go to an event, I won't finish later than 10, possibly at a stretch 11 o'clock, but I am in bed significantly earlier than I was, even 6 months ago. And I make sure I get 7 to 8 hours sleep. This has transformed my life. It's allowed me to understand when my natural wake-up time is. It's massively supported my kind of metabolic recovery postpartum. I stopped breastfeeding my youngest in February. It's changed my life. And it's something now that, when I travel, I will still find a way to work into my schedule, even if it means making sacrifices in other places. If for whatever reason I miss it, I really miss it. Like, I feel the effects of it. So I think that owning my own wake-up time, making time for myself, aligning my body to enabling its natural circadian rhythm, and then getting in some exercise before the day starts are things that are very helpful for me.
Amazing. We had some amazing conversation, but before we end the show, it comes to my last segment. It's called the 1%, because 99% of the conversation we have is around women, but men are a part of our lives too. So we've dedicated this 1% to them. What's your 1% advice to the men in our lives? What can men do better to support women?
I think men can best support women by also being interested in and prioritizing their own health. Men are notoriously bad at accessing preventative care. Most men have never heard the term andropause.
Yep.
It is difficult for women to take on the burden of caregiving. Women take on the burden of caregiving for men if men don't understand and make time for and own their own health. If men just owned their own health a little bit more already, that would free up women.
Yep.
It would also make conversations about all of the different ages and stages easier, because men would understand what their hormonal profiles look like. They would understand how these hormonal profiles change as they age. They would be engaged in conversations around fertility a lot earlier. They would be engaged in prenatal and postpartum care. So I think supporting men as women, working with men to own and prioritize their own health is probably the best thing we can do.
Amazing. Any parting advice for our listeners?
I don't think so, other than understanding that in this world that we live in this one very short life that we get, the person who is the expert in your health, your body, yourself, is you. And the more that you can do to own that, and it is your right and your duty as a human being, the better.
Amazing. Wise words. That was such an insightful conversation with Sophie Smith, a true pioneer reshaping the way women experience healthcare in the Middle East. If today's episode made you think, why did I not know this before? you are not alone. We need more conversations like this in the boardrooms, in clinics, in homes, and of course in podcasts like this. Women deserve healthcare that hears them, sees them, and evolves with them. And the more we talk about it, the faster we change the system. This is not a podcast. This is a movement. Share this with all the women who were told it's all in your head, because we are done keeping quiet about it. And of course, follow for more expert-led, heartfelt conversation about women wellness. I'm Gayu Lewis, and until next time, menopause, why pause? Let's play.